Hello and welcome back to the channel, and thank you for joining me on my interview series. Today I'm talking to Sean James Cameron, who is a gardener. He used to work in television, a lot of television experience actually, but he's been gardening pretty much all of his life. He knows everything about vegetables, about flowers, about running an allotment, and in these times that we've been told that there could be food shortages and famine coming, a lot of people are thinking, oh, maybe I should grow my own. Well, who better to talk to than somebody who not only grows his own but runs a whole YouTube channel all about it, Sean's Gardening World, Sean James Cameron. Sean, welcome to the show.
Hello, and it's a rather appropriate time that we're talking because spring has just sprung.
Spring has just sprung. What's it like where you are? You're in London, aren't you?
Cold. Hence why I've got the hat on and I've
That's,
got a warm cup of tea. But as the cup says, bright times are ahead.
and are bright times ahead for gardeners this year, do you think?
Well, last year we had a very bad year because we had too much sun. Can you
Oh,
believe it?
too much sun.
We had
Right.
too much sun. I remember my greenhouse getting up to 36 degrees on a regular basis. So hopefully this year we'll have a bit of a difference between rain this week on sun the next. Although the last 2 weeks it's done nothing but rain, and I feel like I'm back. I feel like I'm back in Wales.
And you are originally Welsh, but you're living in London, and you have a YouTube channel. I'm just going to show it on the screen. There you are. Let's just pull it up here. Here we go. Sean's Gardening World, practical, down-to-earth gardening advice. And as you can see, lots of interesting videos all about gardening, how to do things, what to grow, and all of that. So we're talking, Sean, about the potential food shortages that we've been told are likely to come. We've had a lot of difficulties in the Netherlands with the farmers over there being basically eradicated from their land, and they're putting up a huge fight to prevent that. And it's very hard to imagine, if you get rid of farmers, what people are going to do. There's the war in Ukraine, which of course is one of the places that does a lot of grain across the world, the bread bin of the world, I think they call it. And so it's possible, with all the troubles that we seem to be having, that there are going to be food shortages. First of all, as a gardener working on an allotment, busy doing your YouTube channel, have you heard about this sort of thing? Is that percolated into the allotment world?
I've heard about food shortages, but I haven't actually seen it when I go to the shops. So
Right,
I don't know
okay.
what the TV are talking about because even though I worked in TV, I haven't worked in TV for about 6 or 7 years, and there's a reason for that. Mainly because when you are part of a TV crew, you haven't got time to think, so you just do what you're told and you put out the news. I used to work on a breakfast TV show, and we'd start work at 10 o'clock in the night to get the show ready for 6 o'clock. And you just didn't have time. There wasn't a culture to question things, and it was just put out what the line was. Even if deep down you thought this doesn't ring true. So I decided to get out and go down the YouTube route because then at least I can control and put out the correct messages.
Exactly, which is, what I try to do with my opinion pieces and, of course, my interviews. And so you've been a gardener. Let's just sort of go back to your roots, as it were. Excuse the pun there, but you've been a gardener pretty much almost from childhood, haven't you?
I started when I was about 14, 15. And I remember a conversation where I came from the Rhondda Valleys. And at that time in the 90s, drugs were just starting to come into the valleys. And I remember overhearing a conversation between my parents and my cousin. And they were like, we need to get him involved in something so that he doesn't get dragged into the drug culture. Because a lot of my friends at school had got involved with that. So I clearly remember that I was taught how to prune a rose. And my cousin she took me into the garden and she taught me how to prune a rose. And just as a little side point, this is actually her coat. When she died, the coat was passed on. So even though it's far too big for me, it does keep my bits warm on a cold winter's day. So I started to get into gardening then. Quickly came to the conclusion that yes, flowers are good, roses are good, they smell nice, they look nice, but you can't eat them. And if
No.
you're going to spend time in the garden, then surely it's better to do something that you can pick and eat and put it on the table.
And we've been growing food, since the sort of end of the Neolithic. Well, before that, really, just in the Neolithic times, the Iron Age, and all of those sort of times, and we become farmers. But we were subsistent farmers, really, back in those days, and we were all, up until really very recently, we were all involved in the land or supplying trades or products for the land. We've now pretty much divorced ourselves from food production as a nation since, well, 100 years or so ago, particularly after the Second World War, where it's become a much more industrialized business. And a lot of people now really have no idea, to a certain degree, not only where it comes from, what's supposed to be in season to your locality, or the whole process of growing something. And people's expectations are a little, what can we say, askew from the reality of how long things grow and what time they can grow things. So I wondered if we could just touch on the fact that some people might be thinking, oh, if there's food scarcity, I want to be growing food. What would be the first steps, would you say, if you were starting out to grow something for the table?
It depends what, like, you will listen to the news now and they will say there's a shortage of tomatoes. Well, tomatoes shouldn't be available. Anyway, if you eat with the seasons, you won't be eating your first tomato until about June time. So we're trying to cheat nature for our own benefit. And that's what I hear on the news. Oh, there's a shortage of tomatoes. Well, there should be, because they shouldn't be around, Anyway.
Yes, I suppose it's like having strawberries all year round. They're being ferried in or shipped in from other parts of the world, in which you then have an unrealistic expectation for the food that should be available.
Yeah, so if you want to live off the land, you need to change your mindset a bit. That you can't go into the garden today and pick a pear, because pears are only available from the summer and autumn. But it involves a bit of planning. Like, you're not going to get anything from seed to your table within a month. I would imagine the quickest you could do it is probably 2 months, but it's usually 3 months. So March and April now, time to put your potatoes in. And if you put your first early potatoes in, and you can just put it into a pot. If you haven't got a garden, you can just get a pot, put the potatoes in there. And if you do first early potatoes, you'll be picking them June. And the major advantage of growing your own food is it is the food, but it's the flavor. Because by the time you buy things, they've been dead for about 2 or 3 weeks, and the moisture has started to come out of it, and the flavor's gone. So that is the one thing that you do notice when you grow your own, is the flavor. And some people, when they eat a carrot for the first time that comes out of the ground, they'll say to themselves, well, this doesn't taste like a carrot. But that is a carrot. It's just you've been conditioned to buy things that have been on the shelf for 2 or 3 months, and they don't taste like anything by the time you get them.
And I suppose the varieties are very different from the commercially produced food, which is, well, by its nature, commercial, and they're probably not growing a huge number of varieties, whereas as an independent grower, you can choose the type of, you can have purple carrots if you'd rather than the traditional orange one. He said pink ones then. I don't know why. Don't know if there is a pink carrot, but you know what I mean.
When carrots first started, they were actually the colour the parsnips were, but they weren't appealing. So the red was introduced.
And that's just the varieties. That's not a pigment that's been added.
No. Like, when you start, it's a bit overwhelming. You'll buy the seed book and you open the seed book and you think, where the hell do I start? There's 30 varieties of carrot. Well, if you're stuck, there is something called the RHS Award of Garden Merit. And if you look on the seed package, you will see this. And what that means is that the Royal Horticultural Society have done a test, and out of all the carrot varieties, that is the best for the garden. So that will help you to narrow the search down, because when you begin, there's a bit too much information, or you'll go to this one website and this will say do it this way, you go to another website and they'll say do it this other way. So there are these little indications called the RHS Award of Garden Merit, and if you go down that route, then you're successful.
Right. One of the other things that people might worry about is how much space it will take, whether it's in the sunshine or not. You know, in my garden, it's at the back of my house and it's north facing, and it's pretty cold all year round there. And I've tried growing potatoes in bags, and that was relatively successful. Needed a lot of water, I noticed. But so space is one thing, and the other thing is the soil. You know, you hear about different parts of the country. Some may have a chalky soil or a clay soil or a rocky soil, whatever it is. How much does that play into the growing of veg?
Yes, my allotment is on a clay soil, which is very good for keeping the nutriment into the soil. But if we get a very hot summer, it starts to crack up, and then you start to lose veg because you can't water them. So if you have got a poor soil, you can do pots, or you can do raised beds where you can put in bags of multi-purpose compost. And I know people will say, but a bag of compost, if I need 6 of them to fill my bed, all this is going to be expensive. Well, how much is your health worth?
Well, that is true.
If we look at food as a medicine, I think you have a different relationship. There are some foods that I can't stand, but I eat them because I know there's a bit of goodness. So I mentally say to myself, I hate this, but I'm going to eat it because it's like taking a pill. And I'd rather take a vegetable that I hate to eat than actually start to pop pills, because I know people that take about 30 pills before they get out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's very true. And presumably, when you're growing it your own, unless you're putting on pesticides and insecticides and all those sort of poisons to get rid of the pests, you're pretty much organic, aren't you?
Yes. And if you grow your own, then at least you know what you've put into them. Now, it might take 2 or 3 years to get to know the soil and to get to know which feeds to put in. But it's the enjoyment. You get out and about, you can throw away the membership to the gym. Although there is a downside. If you belong to an allotment site, it's very easy to sit in the communal shed all day with a cup of tea and a pack of biscuits.
Yeah, that's not getting anything done, is it?
As long as you say to yourself, 10 minutes for the talk, an hour on the soil,
yes,
then you won't go far wrong. And also, it's a way of meditating. If you're down on the ground and you're picking out the weeds, sometimes an hour can go past and you aren't even aware of it. Or you could put a podcast in and you can listen to that. And sometimes I've gone to my plot and I've put my headphones in and I haven't put anything to play in the headphones. I've just got them on just to tell people he's busy, so they don't come over and have a chat.
Oh, what a good idea.
A lot of people do like to have a chat. So if you put a pair of headphones in and pretend that you're listening to something, then you can get lost in the task and actually start to see what's in the soil. And I'm amazed that people will buy flowers and they'll go, oh yeah, that flower smells, that, and then they just put it onto the shelf and they just forget about it. Have a look at the flower and just have a look at all the sort of the inner world that's there within that flower, the ridges of the flower. And it's a facet. Well, hours can be spent in the garden, just enjoying it, and especially the wildlife. And I think I've got, because in London we've got parrots, we've got these parakeets.
Oh, have you?
There are, yes, and you'll discover that if you ever decide to grow a sweet corn, they'll come down and they'll take the all.
So you do have someone to talk to then, if it's
yes.
only parrots.
Well, as the song says, I talk to the trees.
So some people, of course, will have a garden. Some people won't. and they may want to take on a plot on an allotment, and there may be a number of those. Whenever I know I don't have an allotment, I don't really get the time, unfortunately. I would love to, and I'm hoping to move to some property where I've got an actual garden to do that. That's my plan. But if you wanted to get an allotment, I always think of allotments as being one of those things you sign up to, and then there's months and months, because a lot of people want to be on an allotment growing their food. So can you tell us, A, the process? Is it easy to get an allotment? And is there a way of, shall we say, getting up the queue?
Well, it depends where you are first.
Right.
Camden in London, the waiting list is 25 years. So you may as well pack up and move. I find usually it's about 3 years, 3.5 years.
Really?
But there are two sort of grades. You can go to the council, and you normally go to the leisure department, and you'll find the section there. But there are some people that run private sites, like the National Trust. They've turned some of their land over sort of to plots. And just have a look online. Have a look at a map of the area, and then you will realize how green the place is. And then just scroll down. So the standard practice is you phone up the council, they send you out the form, you fill the form in, and you say, I want to go on site number 1, number 2, number 3. And then whatever comes up first will sort of be offered to you. Now, most people will just sit back. And I know somebody who's been waiting 12 years for a plot. And I said, when was the last time you contacted the council? And they said, oh, well, 12 years ago. Now, it shouldn't happen, but it does happen. Some allotment sites have 2 lists. They have the official list, and they have their own list for people that just turn up at the gate on a Sunday morning. And I've proved this in the past. If you want to sort of, now some people would frown on this, but if you want to jump the waiting list, and I know people will have a moral issue with this, but at the end of the day, how bad do you want to grow your own food?
Well, true.
That put your name on the list. That's the first thing. Find out if there's a Facebook page for that site, and then just keep your eyes open. And then they will usually say once a month, there's a working party day on Sunday, where a working party day is everybody gets together and they clean the site. So they'll go and clean the toilets out, or paint a fence, or put up a brand new panel of fence because it's fallen down. If you go to them, your face gets seen, and you can then demonstrate through those days how keen you are to get a plot. And if you were going there every month, then the secretary will think, this person's really keen. A plot will be coming available soon, and I'll give him first choice.
Yeah.
But the thing is, once you have the plot, then don't just sit back and go, I'm not going to get involved with your community work, because you've been given a leg up because you've demonstrated that you want to get involved. So if that does happen and you get a plot within 2 or 3 months, then do get involved. Do start, keep going. Don't just use the system to get your plot, because it'll be frowned on.
Yes.
If you go ill and you can't do your plot for a month or 2, then you'll be the first one that they'll come after, because they'll think, he duped us. So if you go down that route, you will get a plot quicker. But it's you saying, I also want to be part of a community and not just grow my own food.
Yes.
And sometimes that is as important as growing the food itself.
Yes, I can absolutely see that if you've shown a lot of enthusiasm, and maybe people don't realise that you put your name on a list and you're sort of an alien, or a foreigner until you're part of the club and you've actually got your bit of land. But you're saying actually you can come into these work parties and get to know people and even offer help to those. Perhaps there's somebody who's a bit older or a bit infirm or they've had an accident. You can say, well, look, I'll come in and just help you dig your stuff like that. And you know, then maybe they'll say, well, that's great. You know, you can share some of the proceeds if you give me a hand. And then, you know, you get to know people and people can see that you're a worthy member of the team because it's a community at the end of the day, as you've explained.
Yes, I bumped into a person about 6 months ago, and it turned out that she lives 5 miles away from the site that I was on. And I said, how come you haven't got a plot? There's a site just around the corner from your house.
Right.
And she said, oh, I've been to the open days and I've said to them, I can see at least 6 plots that haven't been done. Why can't I have one of them? And sort of, you know, I've been on the list for 5 years and they haven't phoned me, and I come to the open day. And I thought to myself, what you're actually doing is you're saying to the committee, you're a troublemaker.
Yes.
And I was surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised that she hadn't had a plot there. And she did say, will you help me get a plot there? Well, I know the guy in charge. But I was very reluctant to get involved because I thought, I don't want to ruin my reputation for sending somebody there that's going to make their life hell.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. So if you manage to get a plot and you become part of the community, presumably people are there to help one another, not just in digging bits, but to share information about certain things, because there's going to be some people there who've been there for years and years and years and know exactly how certain things that they've grows in the best way. So I can see that there's a lot of help. Is there? How can I put this?
But this is what I find. People are scared to go up and ask for help.
Oh, really?
Every site will have what we call the old boys, or sort of, you know, the old girls who have been there for 20 or 30 years. And they'll say to you, you don't want to grow that potato, you want to grow this potato, because the red potatoes, they don't do that well down here. And especially people in their 20s and 30s, they just don't want to go up and ask.
Right. Oh, that's interesting.
Whereas the older people, they want to pass on the knowledge, because as a guy said to me, what's the point of taking my secrets to the grave? I may as well pass them on to somebody else.
Yes, and you want people to succeed and thrive. Is there jealousies and arguments that you get across as you would in most communities? There's usually a little smattering of something.
Well, an allotment is always said as a microcosm of your society.
Yes. So
you'll get some sites where everybody gets on, and you'll get other sites where everybody just fights with each other. So, you know, put your name down for 2 or 3 different sites and go to all the open days that they do. And I went to one on the weekend, and the guy was showing to prospective people, and he just had no enthusiasm. He was going, "Oh, there's your plot. It's £50. We don't do any social events here, and it's just do your plot and go home," type of thing. Whereas I then said to them, there's a site just down the road, and I know they've got plots available, but they have a social site. They have fish suppers where you pay your £12 and you turn up and you have your fish and chips and a bingo night. And a lot of allotments have shops, so you can go there on a Sunday and get discounted products like your compost, your bean sticks, and your seeds. Well, sometimes even if you don't want to buy stuff, because you know the shop is open, it's quite good just to go down and have a chat to Paul and have a cup of tea and just to chew the fat. Because if you're self-employed, or you haven't got a job, or
you're retired,
or you're too ill to have a job, or retired, you can go for weeks without seeing anybody.
Yes.
Switch the TV off and go down the allotment site and have a conversation and set the world to rights. you'll probably have the same conversation 6 times in a day.
Yeah. So some people will think, right, okay, they get their allotment plot, and presumably they can put a little shed on it. I've seen where they've got little tool sheds and things like that. What is there a problem with things like theft? Is there security? Would you advise people to take their valuables away with them? What's the deal on that side of things?
If you don't want it to be pinched, don't put it into the shed.
Right, that makes sense.
That's the sort of standard. And I would usually close my shed because I like to think it's my little domain.
Mm.
But recently, I fell into a false sense of security with my plot. Now, the site that I'm on hasn't been targeted for about 6 or 7 years. I bought some new tools on a Monday. I put them into my shed with the labels on, so they all look quite attractive. And 24 hours later, they were pinched.
And you've got a video, I think,
yes.
that you made a video. I'm just looking to see where it is here.
There it is, the one in the middle there, just below.
Oh, the worst, this one here.
Yeah. So
Gardening vlog, terrible news. There it is.
That video is, I turned up and I saw the shed was open, so I started to film, just in case, there was somebody in there asleep or something. I just wanted to have the evidence.
Yes.
And they did 25 sheds in the one night. We've told the police
25 sheds.
25 sheds. What's interesting is they only did the sheds on the left-hand side of the site.
Oh, right.
Well, I think they'll be back to do the sheds on the right-hand side of the site.
So they know which ones they've done. They took one trip round. Is there 2 entrances?
Usually sites will have 2 entrances.
So they may have gone one entrance and just worked their way around and then scarpered out the far entrance,
yes,
only to come back in a few weeks' time when it's all sort of simmered down a bit.
Well, what was interesting was my allotment starts with the letter A, and another allotment site was done on the same night, and they start with a letter A. So I've given the warning to the other sites that start with B and C, and if they get burgled, then they're making their way through the list.
Yes. Oh, how interesting.
I've now decided I'm not going to close my shed. So they didn't break my shed, but there was a knife there. It was about 12-inch knife. And the sheds that were a lot harder to get into, they actually pulled off the door, and they've made a hell of a mess. So I've decided to leave my door open. But there is a security camera inside. So if my phone happens to go off halfway through this, it isn't the government emergency. It's actually somebody's broke into your shed. So I might have to go.
So I guess that makes very good advice, because if you've got it all bolted up and they decide they really want to get in, they're going to make a complete mess of your shed, and you'll lose.
Somebody said to me, a lock is not there to get rid of a lock is not there to get rid of the burglars. The lock is there to stop the other plot owners from going in and having a borrow of something. But yeah. I'm coming up to 48. I've had plots since I was 16. This is the first time that I've had anything pinched. So
right. So it's quite rare.
It's not that bad,
Yeah. What sort of size of a plot can you get, and how much produce can you grow?
Sizes will all depend where you are in the country, and also they like to measure them in rods and perches.
Right, which is very old-fashioned.
Yes. And I'm not quite sure what a rod is, but I know by my eye that I can go and have a look and say that's a full-size plot. But it just depends where you are in the country. The sites are different. The site that I went to go and visit on Sunday, the plots were like football pitches.
Wow.
They were huge, and then there are other sites where it's probably the size of the room that you're sat in now.
Right.
And that's one of the tricks: is when you take a plot on, don't take on too much. The eyes will often go, "Oh, I can get all this done within a month," and then 3 months later, because what usually happens is a new person will take on a plot. They've seen the Ground Force program on the BBC. They'll take on a plot on Friday. They'll dig it all, and then come Tuesday, you never see them again because they're just tired.
Yeah.
So the trick is to do it and to do it often.
And when you get a plot on an allotment, I imagine some people will imagine that it's pristine, that it's all weeded and ready to go, that, you know, it's all brand new to you. Now, I've watched your channel, of course, and I've seen you take on plots, and there's all sorts of detritus that's been left. The grass has gone ballistic. There's trees and bushes that, you know, it depends, I guess, on the site of how much or how long that particular site's also been abandoned before someone's come in. So,
well, I've got two plots now, and I've got one plot which is about 4 miles away from my house. I've just taken on a new plot, which is 4 minutes from my house.
Right.
And for the next year, I'm going to run the two plots because I've invested a lot in the larger plot, but there's not enough space to grow everything that I want to grow. So I'm going to take on this new plot around the corner and grow the salads and things for. So I'm going to grow one plot for spring and summer, the other plot for the winter.
Right. Oh, okay.
But, so the first plot I turned up and it's just full of grass. The grass was about 4 foot high, and it's taken a year to get it into a manageable state. Whereas the new plot that I took on, unfortunately, the guy that had it before me, he was dying, and he knew that he was dying, so he kept his plot weed-free, and he put all of the membrane down. So I've taken that plot on, and it's ready to put seeds in.
Right, so much can differ.
And also the prices change as well. In London, on average, you pay about 45 pounds a year. Whereas in Newcastle, they're about 150 pounds.
Wow.
And in Epsom and in Greenwich, they're about 350 pounds each.
Blimey, so there's a huge change in cost. It's no uniform price.
No. And also it depends whether you live in the borough. So if you live in the borough where the allotment site is, say, for example, you could get it for £150. If you live outside the borough, it could be 350. And there was one case that I went to go and to get involved with, and the woman had a plot across the street. But down the street was the boundary line between one council and the next council.
Oh, no.
So she had to pay £350 just for crossing the street. But they got the protests involved, and I think they brought the price down to something a bit more like £200. Whereas in Wales, my first plot cost £1.50. And when they put it up to £2, they spent £50 on a bus to go down to the council to protest.
Blimey. Well, that was some time ago, I imagine, your first plot.
Yes, but I still think even in Wales, they're around the £45 mark. That seems to be the average cost.
Right.
So you sign up either in the spring or in the autumn, and then you take the plot on, you pay the money, and then they just leave you get on with it to a certain extent. They will come around once a month and just say, well, you haven't done anything. So, you've got 28 days to try and get your plot in order. But this is the thing. Even if you just show up and do your plot and you don't seem to get anywhere, it actually shows that you are trying. It's surprising. Yes. So many people will take a plot on and you don't see them for 3 months.
Yeah, they just disappear. So we've been concentrating on allotments because if people have got gardens, they may have already had a go at gardening and growing stuff, which is why we've spent more time on the whole allotment process. And of course, your YouTube channel is featured on allotments and what you do with your food and things like that.
Yes, because it is very difficult to get any land. Like the dream that I've got is to have land where I can put a small, tiny house. I can come out in the morning, go down and get the eggs from the chickens, and but I haven't got a spare for £45,000 in order to buy any land. And
And the rest.
yeah, yes.
That is,
So
it's not just the land, because then if you don't live nearby the land, you're a bit suckered if you're not allowed to live on the land to grow.
yeah.
So let's just talk about the food itself. What sort of things can you grow in this country from once you've prepared the soil? And let's assume that you've got the soil into some good condition with composts and various things. What sort of vegetables or fruit and salad items can you grow in this country, say within your first year or so?
So the first thing I would say is grow something like lettuce or radish, because they'll be ready to pick in about 6 weeks' time,
Right.
and that will give you that bit of encouragement to carry on. Because things like pumpkins, if you put them in April, they aren't going to be ready until about October, November time. But it depends when you have your plot, because if you have it in the winter, it's too late for the winter crops. The ideal time is in spring, in March and April.
Which
So
is what we're at now, really.
Next month, I will be sowing broad beans, runner beans, French beans, carrots, parsnips, Brussels sprouts, cabbages, cauliflowers. April is a very busy month. And then if you think about what do I want for the Christmas table, you start thinking about winter crops in June,
Right.
which
Yeah.
some people can't get their heads around.
No, I can see that.
It's 28 degrees. You're in the garden in your shorts, and you want to start thinking about, right, am I going to have parsnips for next February?
Yeah.
So there is a bit of planning involved. But if you say now you want to start doing a bit of planting in the next month or two, and you think, I haven't got all the equipment, I haven't got compost, I haven't got seeds, the windowsills are full with books. It is possible to go to a garden centre and actually buy the plants, the plug plants, and then they can go straight in.
So these are sort of just almost like not seedlings, but a bit more advanced than a seedling.
Yes, they're about that big, and
Right.
you just put them into a pot or put them straight into the ground. April is the time to put your potatoes in, and like I said, put them into a pot if you haven't got a garden. It's actually possible to grow stumped carrots in a pot as well, which are the carrots that only grow to about that big, as opposed to the ones that are about 6 inches long. But ultimately, for the cost of a bag of compost and a packet of seeds, have a go. If they die, they die. You can have another go and put some more seeds in. Like March, everybody's excited now. They're putting all their seeds in, but it's still too cold. The soil won't warm up until about April the 6th. And for me, my last frost date is the second week in May. So anything that is out in the garden from now until May, I have to keep an eye on the weather forecast, and if there's a frost coming, I need to go out and put my fleece. But this one year, I was a bit busy and I couldn't get my seeds in. So I put all my seeds in the second week in May. And surprisingly, they actually did better than all the stuff that I'd started on the windowsills and put into the propagators and that I've got through the winter months. So gardening can be as expensive or as cheap as you want it to be, and just give it a go. That's what I say. If it doesn't work, try again.
Well, that's been a very fascinating insight. And if people think, food shortages, don't leave it too late.
No.
Get going now. You don't need a huge amount of land. And I guess if you've got even tiny windowsill and things like that, or you've got access to a greenhouse to start the seeds, presumably in a greenhouse is a good place to sort of start your seedlings off. And then
also you've just given me an idea there. If you can't, it will take time to get a plot, and if you haven't got space to put things in pots outside in your garden, you could go and join one of these societies like Friends of the Park. And then after a few months, you could say to yourself, no, why don't we do a community garden? Because in America, they don't really get the idea of what an allotment is. In America, they have community gardens, which you have to give up at the end of the year. And then it's a bit of a scramble to get your plot back then, because you have to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning, you go in the queue, you might not get the plot that you've been on for the previous year. Whereas at least in this country, if you take a plot on, you can run the same bit of land for 25 years.
Well, absolutely brilliant. You've got a YouTube channel, as we saw, Sean's Gardening World. Let me just flash that up on the screen again. So if you want to find out more about gardening, Sean, you do hints and tips, do you not?
Yes, the idea of the channel is that it's split into two. So there is, like the video on the left-hand side there, it's either straightforward advice on how to do something particular, or there are the vlogs where I'm just showing you what I get up to every week. In the vlogs, I will tell you there is a lot of drinking tea and just having moaning about the weather.
Well,
that's what it is. It's the fun aspect in it.
Yes.
And if it does, and one thing that people say to me is, I like to watch your channel because you show the weeds.
Yes.
This isn't.
It's not industrial farming, is it? It's
no.
not industrial farming. You're growing food, but it's a hobby as well. You've got the community if you're on a plot, and the satisfaction, presumably, of creating from a seed something that ends up from the soil onto your plate.
And also, I think it makes you more in tune with nature and how things are changing. Because I've seen over the last 20 years that our summers are getting warmer and our winters are getting damper. Now,
it's global warming for you, apparently. We won't get into that argument.
I was always taught in school, and nobody can seem to clarify this, so I think I might have dreamt it. But we were always taught in school that round about 2005 to 2025, the Earth's axis was going to change. And that we were either going to end up with the weather in Spain, or we were going to tilt and go up to Iceland.
Well, let's hope it's the weather in Spain.
So, as far as global warming is concerned, something is going on, but I don't necessarily believe that it's down to man. I think it's a bit arrogant for man to think that they can control the weather.
Well, I hope to have
that's a subject all
it is. I hope to actually have an interview with a chap who wants to talk about the dimming of the lights and various things that are nefariously going on in the skies. I've got that coming up in the future. But Sean,
there are people who will grow things under lights and under heat maps.
Yes.
But that costs hundreds of pounds. I spoke to somebody and he said to me, I bought all the equipment that's out there. And then I realized this one tomato that I grew cost about £750 because of the
all the gear you've had.
Yeah, because of all the bills.
So just
like I said, it can be as expensive or as cheap as you want to do it.
Just before we go, the global warming thing, just clear this argument up. CO2, this so-called killer thing that's causing all this problem. If I'm right, CO2, the gas of life, is what plants depend on, isn't it?
Well, yes, because if you take that away, then they just drain and die away.
Sean,
sometimes I think you need to take, and this is from somebody that used to work in TV. Switch the TV off and go off and do something less boring instead.
And there was a TV show of that name, was there not? Sean James Cameron, it's been an absolute joy to talk to you. Thank you so much for joining me. We are old friends, but it's been great. Do check out Sean's channel. Bright times are ahead. And give it a go, as Sean says. I hope it's been useful. Do put your comments below. Sean, thanks again.
All the best, and I'll hope. And don't forget, you need to come to my plot and do a bit of digging, because
Yes.
you can't have any potatoes unless you put an hour in.
That's true. I will come up and do some digging. Thank you again, Sean. I'll be back again with some more interviews later on this week. In the meantime, check out Sean's channel and see you next time. From Sean and
Bye.
I, goodbye.